All right, let's go. All right. Kane went to the Wings, and I don't know how he's going to do. He hasn't played yet as we talk. And Dedorov goes to Canucks. By God, they didn't get much for him. But I thought they'd get a lot more for him.
So did I. You went for a couple of draft picks. So now Detroit's kind of doing pretty good.
Yeah,
I think they're doing as good, or if not better, than some people expected. Can a guy like...
You have to be very, very careful working him in, because whoever is playing is not going to play. It'll go down the list. Somebody's not going to play. Anyhow.
And just to let you know, since Tocchet took over the Vancouver Canucks, if you take it from the day he took over to now, they lead the National Hockey League by far in hits.
You mean they're tougher in Vegas?
Well, not like right now. I think Vegas. There's one other team I think is leading the NHL, then Vegas, then Canucks. If you take it from when Tocchet took over to now, they lead the thing.
He's a lot more vocal now than he was in the other places. I'm watching him now. He's not quite as happy when they come to the bench. Although when they get a hat trick or something like that, he goes over and pats them on the back and everything. I never patted anybody on the back.
You never touched the players, did you, when you were...
I never.
Well, tell me. Well, you had a reason why. Remember when Bobby Orr scored that goal? He kind of put you in your place.
Yeah. Did I ever tell that story? I'm going to tell it again. I remember it was in Nova Scotia, and he made a mistake. Yeah, Bobby Orr made a mistake, and they scored. So then he grabbed the puck and the next shift out and went through the whole team and put it in the top corner. So, new coach. I went down and I said, nice goal, Bobby. He said, thanks a lot, coach. Thanks a lot. I never forgot that. I can still see him looking at me. And I never, ever, and he won the scoring championship. Bobby Orr he was a defenseman, won the scoring championship twice. Hard to believe, but anyhow.
Once with you that year, actually.
Anyhow, I never touched any.
He led the National Hockey League in points, and you never congratulated him on a good play.
Never.
You used to whisper in their ears a lot, though. You knew I always watched the bench when you coach, and when you had, you would whispering stuff in their ear, and they would look straight ahead, and you could just tell you were giving it to them something awful.
Well, nobody knew when I was giving them heck.
Oh, nobody knew, but you were real. You go, oh, that poor guy. Oh,
I thought that was a pretty good story.
Yeah,
I never forgot it.
I asked you that last night. This last night was. You got a guy like Bertuzzi for the Leafs who is just playing awful. Seems almost somewhat disinterested, making over $5 million.
Yeah, that kills me.
$5.5 million.
$5 million.
So, how would you said you wouldn't call him into the office, right?
No, I never. I talked to him on the ice, and somehow or other on the ice, you always seem to. You call him in the office, it's like a teacher calling a student into
a principal. You go into the principal's office.
Yeah.
Principal's office.
Yeah.
Which happened to you a lot. So maybe that's why you don't do it.
I never thought of that. I used to get called in there quite a bit.
Yes, you did.
I remember one time he shot me. He says, "Why do you do this, Don? Why do you get?" And Richard.
Well, before we get into that, Dad, for a lot of the younger people that are listening, what was the punishment you got?
Oh, I got strapped.
Well, tell them what they did, because a lot of people won't.
They just can't relate to such violence now.
Well, it was like a conveyor belt. It was thick.
Rubber? Was it rubber or leather?
No, it was leather. It was thick, and boy.
Like, where would they strap you? Where would they hit you?
Right on the hands. And boy, I'll tell you, he gave it to me, Mr. Jackson gave it to me pretty good.
So they used to have...
I never told my dad. I was afraid my dad would go and get the guy. I said,
Did your mom know?
she could see my hands swollen. And I remember one time I got strapped, and I couldn't open the door, and so I opened the door with my wrists.
And then you put your hands in
And
the
down
snow
in the snow.
just to cool down. They were so hot.
Boy, were they. He says, this hurts. This really does hurt me more than it hurts you.
So what would you do in school that would cause such retaliation?
I think what that was from when I threw the paint on the Les Allman and I and Ed Birchall. We used to go and do the rink. We'd get up early.
So you'd paint the lines on the rink?
Yeah, and we'd paint the lines on and I was doing the goaltender red across. And the girls were teasing me. It's the crooked, And I soaked the thing and going all over their coats and everything. I think that's what I got strapped for.
Well deserved.
Well deserved, yeah. Well,
there was a
deserved
reason.
it.
You wouldn't
but
do that.
I didn't. I deserved it. But I don't think quite as hard.
So, Dad, you, Cindy, and I were watching a couple of games this week.
Yeah.
We watched the Senators and the Panthers, and, we were watching the game. That was getting kind of rough, and the Taychuk brothers were running around and all that. And then the Matthew, the Florida guy, he kept bumping into Ottawa's goalie. And then even halfway, at the end of the second period, I think it was, he went over, and the goalie said something, and they were kind of pushing and shoving, and none of the Senators did anything. And then Zach McEwen went after him and got a 5-minute major. And you weren't too happy, you were a little disappointed with J.D. Smith.
And here's what he said. As the head coach, you realize you're throwing away an opportunity. Senators coach D.J. Smith said, I wrote this down. You have to just keep playing. I don't know what went on between the periods. I don't know whether it was after we took the 5-minute major. You don't give yourself a chance to win, and you can't play like that in the NHL. I don't understand that. I mean, here's a guy that stood up for his,
McEwen stood up for his goalie.
Yeah, stood up for his goalie.
And when you were watching it, and they lost 3-0, and you said, that game could go 9 more periods and they weren't scoring on Florida or Bobrovsky. And he kind of throws McEwen under the bus there.
Yeah, I just don't understand it.
Okay, Dad, we're going to take some questions from some listeners. And Craig McKay wants to know, did you ever consider making Bobby Orr a forward because of his offensive abilities?
No, and you know who the first guy that recognized this was Bucko McDonald. When he was playing minor hockey. And they asked him after a while, why did you consider putting Bobby Orr on defense? Because he weighed about 110 pounds. And he said, because he was out there every second shift all the time. And that's why he made him on the defense. I remember he went to Oshawa Generals, and they said, and they were all standing around, I want you to say where you played. And when he said defense, all the players laughed. He weighed about 110 pounds.
Yeah, that's what he said. He had to step on the scale, right? They go, Bobby Orr, defense, you go 110 pounds. He says everybody laughed.
They didn't laugh when they saw him play, though.
No. So he did. So he originally started out playing forward.
He was a forward, and Bucko McDonald. It was Bucko McDonald that put him back on defense.
But you sounded as though he needed a defenseman. But if he hadn't have needed a defenseman, wouldn't it make more sense to leave Bobby Orr as a forward to score all the goals?
No, why would you? Like, if you're on the power play, you want your best guy on the point, really.
And boy, I won't go into him in Park. Bobby Orr won the scoring title. He was a defenseman, won the scoring title, and had 5 fights.
Dad and Cindy, spreads.ca is now northstarbets.com. It's still Canadian owned. It's still one of the best places to play in Canada. They have everything you're looking for, slots, live dealer tables, and a sports book with built-in sports betting insights and analysis. Listeners who have already an account with Spreads don't have to do anything. Just sign in to North Star Bets. That's NorthStarbets.com. And you don't have to do anything, and it's not available in Ontario.
And Tim, I see they're advertising on TV during the games now on Sportsnet.
Yep, and they still are going to help us out with Don Cherry's Pet Rescue. We're going to be doing some stuff maybe in the next couple of weeks, and we'll let you know. It's pretty exciting.
Yep.
So let's take another question from I don't know if it's Facebook or Twitter.
Well, it doesn't say, but it's from Mark Kalawowski. I hope I pronounced that right. And on a future podcast, would you talk about coaching your championship team in Pittsford High School in the 70s? He was back in the early 80s. This gentleman says, I was on an MBA program, a club team with one of his former players who spoke very highly of you. So we had a lot of fun in Pittsford when you were coaching.
I had a lot of fun. If you remember when we lost to Aquinas in overtime, remember that there?
Yes.
And I felt worse or as bad losing to that game as I did when we had too many men on the ice and we had the Stanley Cup in our grasp.
And it's true. They were exciting games. And
Boy.
this is high school hockey, and boy, it was exciting.
Yeah, in Rochester. So, Dad, you had a lot of great coaches in your career, right?
Yeah.
So, is that where you kind of learned to coach?
That's where I learned to coach. I remember Bob Clark coming to me and saying, I was unemployed at the time. He says, "Why? I'd like you to coach at the Pittsford High." Now, Pittsford was outside of Rochester, but it was the rich. And I said, "Oh, I've never coached in my life." He says, "Well, you're not doing anything." Bob Clark was a great guy, and he used to say without the E.
Yeah, it's not Bobby Clark of the Flyers.
Yeah, he used to say without the E. So I tried, and that's where I learned excited the first game because I had to change lines and I had to, have practices and the whole thing. And we could put on a power play. Now I'm going to try to name the names. Eddie Scott was in the corners. Jeff Nisley was on the left wing. Jay Hill. Jay Hill was in, and he was a great big guy. And we had Al Vivaberg on the point and John Hoff on the point. And boy, you'd get a penalty. It was automatic. We'd get a goal. And it was.
I remember one thing with Pittsford and, of all the stuff you kind of remember, it's some of the silly stuff, was remember Eddie Scott? And it was back in the day where Bobby Orr started to flip the puck.
Yeah,
to the linesman.
Yeah.
And that did never really happened before, but a few times you're watching highlights, Bobby Orr was flipping pucks.
He was always flipping pucks.
So Eddie Scott tried to do that to the referee.
A little right between the eyes.
Right between the eyes with the puck, down with the ref.
He had a pretty good cut between his eyes, too.
Cut out between the eyes. They were going to suspend him, and he was like, Mr. Cherry, I didn't mean to shoot the puck. I was just trying to give him the puck to him.
Nail him right between the eyes.
So, Dad, we were watching the game the other day, and Mitch Marner took a shot and got it in the jaw.
Pretty good.
It looked like a pretty good cut, and he came back, and they thought he might have broke his jaw, but luckily he just got
got a hat trick.
got a hat trick,
and scored the overtime winner.
That's good. So now everybody's going to say, "See, the National Hockey League, they could wear those bubbles and still play." That's what we're worried about. But I remember you telling me a story about your buddy Brian Kilray when he broke a jaw in Eddie Shore.
It was unbelievable. He really did have a real broken jaw, and he had it wired shut. And you had to carry pliers because if you ever was sick to your stomach, you couldn't get it out. And he had a broken jaw now. Now the doctor said you'll be out 4 or 5 weeks, or at least with a broken jaw. Sure had Patty in at one end. He had Brian out. Brian with a broken jaw. It was really broken in a couple of places, and he had them running at each other and say, "You'll never get hit this hard. You're in the game. You'll never get hit this hard. You can play tonight." So the doctor come in, but he was a little late. He came in. He says, "Is that Brian Kilray out there?" And he said, "Yeah." "Get him off the ice." The only guy Shore would listen to was this doctor, and he got him off the ice.
Okay, Dad, we'd like to thank our sponsors, VintageTendy Magazine. It's a magazine for goalies by goalies, and that's where they get to tendy. See, and then it's all about the goal, great goalies of the past.
You won't believe the pictures.
Great pictures. It's a great magazine, but again, with unbelievable pictures, the highest quality magazine you'll find, high gloss finish, and it really is. If you go to the magazine rack and look at the hockey magazines now, they're all kind of chintzy. This thing is super high quality. And this issue has Clint Malarchuk and many more stories. You got a story about Tretiak. So visit VintageTendyMagazine.com to subscribe, or visit their Facebook page, VintageTendy Magazine. And speaking of,
And you love it.
you'll love it. And speaking of vintage goalies, I'm sure they've done stuff on Johnny Bauer and Matt Rudin. I hope I saying that right. From Facebook, Don, I had a chance to have dinner with the China Wall, Johnny Bauer, and what a wonderful night it was. Do you have any stories about Johnny?
I remember when I was playing for Hershey in the American Hockey League, and I remember we played against Johnny Bauer. I said, holy Dinah, if everybody else in the National Hockey League and playing in the American League is as good as this guy, we're in trouble. And boy, was he good. He was unbelievable. And he spent, what 11 years?
12 years in the American Hockey League. Imagine
And the only
that.
reason he came up was because of Punch.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And Punch wanted him to come up.
Just think, like, he's a Hall of Fame goalie, and he spent, like, how many guys spent, just toiled in the American Hockey League that could have come up and been a Hall of Famer?
Well, when you look at it, I don't know. There was six teams in the in the American Hockey League. There was 6 teams in the Western League. There was 6 teams in the Central League. Everybody that was playing professional hockey back in those days would be in the National Hockey League today. Well, I'll tell you one thing. He was a great goaltender, and and we thought, like as I said when we first saw him, I said, holy Dinah.
If he's in the American Hockey League, how good are the goalies in the NHL? But I was kind of looking at the stats, Dad. When you were playing your first year, well, I guess it wasn't your first year. When you were playing Springfield, when Punch was coaching you, Johnny Bauer kind of had your number in the regular season. He was 8-4 with 3 shutouts.
Holy Dinah. And we played him 12 times.
And then, but you guys then played him in the playoffs, and it went to 7th game.
Well, I remember that game, boy. And and back in those days, you played the 10 minutes. You didn't play the sudden death now. When you score, it's all over. In those days, it was like you had to play the full 10 minutes.
Yeah, it was weird because I looked it up on like a newspaper archive, and it says Indians win 4-2 in overtime. I'm thinking, how does that work? 4-2 in overtime, but you guys scored 2 goals in overtime.
Yeah.
And Bob Beckett and Kenny Schinkel scored.
Kenny Schinkel, the Rat. We call him the Rat. And he was a good hockey player. When I think of those guys, then he went to National Hockey League and they played well.
So then you guys went, I think Hershey beat you guys in the finals.
Yeah, we had a tough team. Yeah, I remember Willie Marshall got a backhand from center ice. I never forgot that. A backhand
From center ice. Do you lose it in the lights?
I don't know. It wasn't too high. And I remember, and I had a hold of him.
You had a hold of him.
I had a hold of
he
him,
did
and
a
he backhanded.
I'm trying to visualize that, Dad.
No,
and
I know.
can't.
That's
It's
hard to believe. It's hard to
just-
believe that a guy would score a backhand.
Do you remember one of the last times we saw Johnny Bauer? He was dropping the puck
Yeah.
in Brampton for the Brampton Beast, like an international team. And he went out, and everybody loved Johnny Bauer.
How could you not love Johnny Bauer? I mean, this guy, he played when he was hurt. And I remember Terry Sawchuk took over from him. And I have to say, Terry Sawchuk was good. And we had Johnny Bauer, and Leafs had Johnny Bauer and Terry Sawchuk. Not a bad twosome as I would say.